Hey Strong Ones, welcome to today's episode. I am live with Paige Roberts, who is a sports expansion specialist, and you can see behind us all her other credentials. She's super smart. What she does is with this technique called Brainspotting, which is very fascinating, which I hope you can explain the difference between Brainspotting and EMDR.
Right.
And then also the importance of light therapy along with brain therapy or the brain spotting.
Right, absolutely.
So I'll just hand it over to you and we can dive into what brain spotting is and what it isn't.
Hey, well, basically brain spotting was born from EMDR.
Right.
Dr. David Grand found that when he combined the EMDR, the eye movement reprocessing desensitization therapy, which is basically manipulating the visual path to trigger the motor cortex in the back of the brain.
Yeah, we can pull this guy out if you want to.
Well, to activate where in the body that we could be potentially holding on to traumatic experiences. So kind of the EMDR, manipulating the eyes. Then with brain spotting, he added in the bilateral sound, which is kind of a hypnotherapy aspect that we know when we have a bilateral mechanism. Even the butterfly hug is another aspect of the bilateral. It will activate both hemispheres of the brain to be able for us to get into the middle brain, where our emotional experience and our primitive brain lie. And that is where we are building these neural pathways that are associated with trauma. So we have those aspects, EMDR and hypnotherapy, then the somatic experience, Dr. Peter Levine's work of knowing that we hold on to trauma within our fascia, within our tissues. It was Dr. Bruce Davis, a craniopath around here in Seattle, who found that when we go into some kind of traumatic mental or physical experience, we actually go into a torsion, which is like a fighter stance, and it tightens the dural motor sheath around our brain and our spine. So with the brain spotting, it allows for us to also access the memory in a focused, mindful state. So you're going to overthink the bad thing that's happened while we're manipulating your visual path, while the bilateral sound's going or the bilateral tapping, so that you can access where you're holding on to the sadness, badness, like typically the gut, that kind of like trauma, kick in the gut, like, oh no, feeling. And this will allow for our brain and body to release the trauma and to release oxytocin, to rewrite the neural pathways for us to have a more calmer, relaxed state around a past memory. Yeah, so it sounds fairly complex, but it's really not. It's basically just you sit here, you listen to the bilateral sound, we manipulate the eyes, and I ask you about your trauma laundry list, mental or physical, the bad things, sad things, unserving things. Trauma's definition is really anything that's less than nurturing that have happened to you in your life. And as you're telling me the stories, I'm going, all right, well, where are you feeling that your dog died? You're like, oh my God, it's my heart, where we typically are holding on to that kind of fetal position, survival mechanism. And then you come out on the other side, no longer being triggered by any of these past negative experiences.
Whew, there it is. Couple of questions. Has there been brain scans of before and after of people doing this? And how has that changed the anatomy of their brain and their spine?
Okay, so basically, and I do WAVI QEEGs myself, as well as there's another individual who does the brain scans. QEEG is the gold standard with the American Academy of Neurology, which is showing the actual distribution of the brain waves within the brain, as well as the blood flow, as well as the overall voltage in the brain. So we can kind of tell if there's inflammation. Inflammation can be caused by many things, but nonetheless, when you show a pre-brain scan, you will kind of see a depressed level of functioning, not as beautiful neuro energy throughout the brain. And we will also see kind of a large amount of beta, which is kind of your anxious, and it's good for attention. Beta is good for attention, but kind of an anxious state. And so with the WAVI QEEGs particularly, we will see a bigger beta-theta difference, and we want more theta. Theta is kind of our creative, relaxed, calm, cool, collected state of mind, literally. So we will see less beta. We will see more brain activity throughout the brain, not just kind of in the middle brain where our primitive, that fight, flight, freeze mechanism, in the emotional brain. We will see all the way up into the frontal cortex, which we know from past scans when it comes to EMDR that we will go from kind of being in the middle brain to populating the frontal lobe. We talk about the frontal lobe with attention, and we know now with some of the research around children with ADD, ADHD, that they actually are having less activity in the frontal lobe, and that, of course, we have medication that can make energy in the brain happen, which isn't always the best long-term solution, and isn't necessarily for everyone. I would advise anyone to try psychotherapy first before medication, but nonetheless, a lot of these little kiddos we're seeing have had some kind of trauma in their life, whether it be a mental or physical trauma, or even environmental. You know, we are hearing a lot around the toxins in our food and our environment negatively impacting the brain. So if you try some of the interventions to release the past negative experiences and to cleanse the body, and getting some of these, you know, even red dye number 5, all that stuff out of your kid's diet, the brain will be populating that frontal lobe and be much healthier. So that's kind of what we're seeing. When it comes to sports injuries, though, and it comes to traumatic brain injury kinds of patterns in the brain, I will typically see lowered voltage, depressed down in the primitive, holding on to the torsion in the spine, and you'll see a lot of the cervical spine area activity as well, because the body's kind of in a braced position. And then we do brain spotting, and we will again see less activity that's hyperactive in those areas, and more cohesion, I guess is really the language that we use within the brain. So no more depressed brain, no more hyperactive muscle guarding, kind of locked into place, post-brain spotting.
Now, how many sessions do people you usually go through to get some of those results?
You can actually get results after one session, but when we're talking about very specifically a performance outcome with like an athlete, I like 10 is kind of my standard. I see changes after 10, and there on out, we get up to about 15 to 20, and I'm seeing individuals reaching, you know, second and third place in the world kind of stuff. So that's where we're at.
So, and for the listeners who know my story, I used to water ski competitively, and with that sport, there has been numerous wipeouts that I have had that has scared me a little bit, even with the sport, and that has caused trauma that I don't even think I realized until now, with taking a little step away from the sport and taking time off from it. How do you help, like, it could be someone who's involved with the sport and has or a sport and hasn't had any like emotional trauma, but the physical trauma can hold someone back so much. How does this help with like the physical injuries, and how that's been so traumatic for the mind too?
So you bring up a great point. So with our 5 senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, we are taking in information all the time. We're actually taking in 1 megabyte of information every second of every day. We are organizing it based off of past experience, and our, above all, survival. Primitive brain, fight, flight, freeze, torsion, that is the, above all else, that will be our reaction, right? When our body is unconsciously taking in information and trying to guard it from the outside world, which is actually pretty dangerous. So when you talk about athletes not really being like, oh, well, nothing bad's ever happened to me, I don't know, I have bumps and bruises, it's part of the sport. It's like, but that's that 97% of our day and our time is unconscious experience. So what happens is we start to unconsciously muscle guard and lose control of our fine-tuned motor skills, which here we'll finally look at the brain. So this is all of our feedback. So pre-movement, movement, and then the feedback from the nociceptor of touch, right? So we're in the primitive.
And for those who are just listening, if you go back to, I don't remember what episode it was, but it was with Allison, who is the neuro research scientist. She has slides on this that talks a lot about in depth a little bit more about the anatomy and the functional aspects of the brain. So that's a good one, episode to refer back to understand the functional aspect of what Paige is referring to.
Yes, because I'm basically talking about how our all of our movement is on the outside of the brain, and that is where we are laying down these pathways to become skilled at our sport.
Right.
So if all of the neuro energy is in this muscle guarding, kind of fight, flight, freeze, unconscious, out of control movement, we do not have our optimal neuro capacity when we're going out there to perform. And you'll see it over and over again with athletes, particularly, I mean, look at Tiger Woods. It's like, okay, so he had a lot of physical stuff going on, a lot of emotional, personal things going on. And when the pressure was on towards the end of the tournament, he was unable to control his swings, his movements. So it was fascinating because when I'm watching sports, I'm watching a whole different way.
You have a different perspective.
Yeah, and so really it's, you come in and we're going through your laundry list of just the physical traumas then. And so with a fine-tooth comb, we're going through and I'm going, okay, so you're water skiing and you catch your edge. Where do you feel that in your body? And you're like, well, I guess I felt my chest because I know I'm going down. It's like, all right, so, and then what? Well, then I went down and said, okay, well, what part hit first? Well, I think it hit my face. It's like, okay, well, where do you feel that in your body? It's like, whoa, I kind of feel that in my neck. And so it's really interesting because I have athletes go through with a fine-tooth comb of every single injury they've ever had, even if it doesn't pertain to that sport. And then you talk about emotional trauma. It's like, well, yeah, not everyone has had adverse childhood experiences. That's things that didn't serve them growing up or any abuse or anything like that. However, just not achieving a certain goal, not placing well in a sport, not in a competition can be trauma because then you're predicting that could happen again. So when you're up there calling on all your resources to compete well, your body's kind of unconsciously guarding against a negative experience, period, when it comes to that sport. So it's not always just like, oh, people who've had a bad, that kind of like textbook upbringing of a really negative experience as a child. It's not necessarily just that. Also, when we talk about chronic stress and overtraining, same thing. It's going to cause trauma on the nervous system. So
Interesting.
We kind of go through the times when you're overtraining or something like that.
And we had a session together where I went through the brain spotting. I thought it was interesting when you kept asking me these questions about the injuries. And I'm like, I don't want it doesn't matter. Like, that's an injury. And it was weird for me afterwards to kind of go back and review why you were asking those questions of like really each step of the injury of where do I feel that in my body? Where does that live in my body now currently? And realizing, oh, I still, like, neurologically, it's holding on to some of these injuries still. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've taken a step back from the sport, is because I literally was like hitting a brick wall and I didn't know how to like move past that. So I just had to take a step away. But I think that's fascinating, just the fact that injuries can trump our body in a way that literally makes us feel like we're running into a brick wall.
Well, and I've never not had a national level, and I guess some high school, but really when it's an individual's occupation, it's just their employment. I've not had an athlete ever say at this point in time after a few sessions, like, oh yeah, I was depressed. I didn't realize I was depressed before. I'm like, yeah, because they just don't even realize it because they're starting to think that they're burning out. They're starting to think like maybe this just isn't right for them anymore. Well, they've tried this or this or this or typical talk therapy or whatever it looks like. And so it takes that after the fact perspective after we brought all this stuff forward for them. You're like, wow, I was kind of neurologically depressed. And everyone thinks of depression as like laying in bed. It's like, well, no, it's really more the like kind of flat effect of just like, I don't know, like I'm going through the motions, I'm doing the training, but I'm not expanding on my performance. So when you're not expanding anymore as an athlete, maybe start questioning and being like, it's like, could I use some reprocessing of the past to move forward in an expansion model like that.
So do you think athletes who overtrain train themselves into depression without even knowing it?
Yeah, and we know that with biochemistry and stuff like that. My undergrad was in exercise science, so it's like I know that when we talk about overtraining, way back when, and they started to realize like, oh, there's overabundance of cortisol. Okay, so cortisol is a stress hormone. So when we start looking at the brain chemicals, our amygdala, it's a pea-shaped organ within our brain. Within 1 second, or even less than that, essentially, but that's when we're actually releasing either good or bad chemical, good being oxytocin, bad being cortisol. When we get this cortisol state, this inflammatory state, that's the same as if we're in like the trauma state. That's the same as if it's like the autoimmune kind of state. That's the same as if we're training. So we know that that oxidative stress on our body is causing damage. So that's the same reaction our nervous system is going to have, is this depressed level of function of survival, fetal position. So just really think of your body just coming down, and less neuro movement, less blood flow, everything. And it's actually Dr. Jeffrey Kuchar with the American Academy of Neurology. He's the MBA psychiatrist, and he's a neuropsych, amazing individual. I've seen him speak 5 times now in the last almost 6 years. He talks about that and uses QEEG in his practice about any athlete goes into depressed level of functioning, whether it be a TBI or concussion or physical injury, and that's what he'd seen. So that was kind of one of my motivation to get the QEEG, to be able to be like showing athletes, hey, this is not, there's nothing wrong with you per se, your nervous system's in survival. Let's detrain this stuff and get you back out there so that you're no longer in the survival state. So, yeah.
You mentioned concussions. How does brain spotting help with concussions?
Well, concussion is a double whammy. So it's a psychological and it's a physiological.
Right.
And so what I will always see with an athlete with concussions is that with the manipulation of the eyes, if you're bringing the pointer towards them, they'll jerk back, and it's an unconscious, it's that muscle guarding. You see it all the time with football.
Yeah.
They'll be running down the field, and their eye will catch some aspect of a signal that they think someone's coming at them, so their body unconsciously muscle guards, and they pull up, and everything's like, what's he doing? It's like, it's not conscious movement. So you'll see with football players over and over again, hockey players to an extent as well. So it's that muscle guarding like that. With the brain spotting, so again, you are reprocessing the experience so that the body stops unconsciously guarding. Yeah, and then you get your free movement again. It's really interesting. So it's like, and I would call it textbooks from Dr. David Grand's work with the brain spotting, because he's a sports therapist. He's in Manhattan, and he talked about the concussions. And so one of my first US ski teamers started going back through her laundry list of past injuries, and concussion in Aspen at a Northern American competition when she was 16, 1 year, and then the next year she went down the same course and faltered in almost the same area of the course and blew her ACL. And I was like, oh man, this is textbook, because the body was unconsciously reacting when she's going down the hill at 70 miles an hour, so that that wouldn't happen again. It was out of her conscious control. So it's really interesting. And so when you look at fighters, or like MMA fighters, so when we're working with them and clearing every single hit in every single fight, they're not unconscious or unconsciously jerking away. They have full movement and control of their movement. So it's that kind of thing. So it works with every sport. You talk about lacrosse players. It's so they're not hesitating when they're going up to take a shot, because one time before they've been, waylaid on the ground and hurt their shoulder. So it's like you're clearing these memories so that they're not consciously or unconsciously muscle guarding and a worry that it's going to happen again.
How does this compare with meditation? Because meditation
would be conditioning. So I call brain spotting deconditioning. We need to decondition the maladaptation. So if I decondition someone, they are primed to go to their mental conditioning coach, their coach, meditation, whatever that looks like. I have all my athletes, part of my performance neuro training is the brain spotting. It's the whole visualization. Absolutely believe in visualization. Because and it's a kind of an aspect of meditation in some ways. But it's keeping yourself on track with the visualization. But nonetheless, we know with sophisticated biofeedback software and testing that is if you are going through the motions yourself, and it's really a lot of work out of Stanford has done some of the VR training and some of that stuff, that when you are seeing and feeling yourself going through it in your mind, you're actually firing those neural pathways throughout the brain and the body. So visualization is a must within my program. The deep belly breathing to stimulate the vagal nerve, to get the body to calm down. And then, of course, I love yoga and trigger point therapy, because you are pushing on the nociceptor and is stimulating the same aspect of your brain. The brain spotting is to get your body to fully release that fascia, fully release the duromotor sheath torsion, so that you have full movement if you're running your body like a cat.
Yeah. Now, a lot of times athletes will talk about like being in the zone, and or like that flow state of like they time almost stops within their like performance and stuff. How does brain spotting help create athletes to be more in that space?
So there's the opposite of the trauma aspect of brain spotting. And technically, every spot turns into a resource in the end, is what we talked about, because we fully reprocessed and rewritten the pathways to a positive neural pathway with the eye position. But what you can do is train in an eye position that is a positive body sensation that pumps the positive chemical of oxytocin. So yeah, that's absolute. If you watched any of my, particularly skiers and snowboarders, they find their spot right before they drop in or right before they go down the course, because it is their calm, cool, collected, confident, and composed spot. And really bringing that up in the body is just going through the positive memories, because we go through the negative memories then the positive training and the zone training. But it works well. Probably just me talking here, I'm going to my resource spot, because again, everyone has a position that they orient their eyes when they are recalling information that they feel like in their flow state. Okay, well, you've noticed I go here, 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 here. That was conditioned into me by my past mentor, right out of undergrad, after I had a TBI and experienced brain spotting for the first time myself. So yeah, that was like 13 years ago, and I still have the same spot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. It's interesting because when with water skiing, the times like when I'm being pulled out of the water and my eyes are closed and I just feel. And so it's interesting how you're saying that people like will find like a certain spot. How does that relate with people who may like close their eyes and just kind of zone in?
The other thing too, so when we're talking about it not being an actual visual, like I'm not, accessing what I'm seeing when my eyes are
right. Yeah.
So your eyes can be shut. People who are blind can be brain spotting. So it's actually the orientation of the eyeball under we call it shades up or shades down.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's it doesn't matter. And I've had a lot of athletes even when they're processing not want to open their eyes. They don't have to. But yeah, so with your flow state spot, I would just have you shut your eyes and we sit here with bilateral sound on and really condition into your body every single positive experience. Some people, like, I've had athletes that need to be playing in a field with their dog in the mountains as opposed to being actually like on the podium. Other ones, the best feeling is on the podium. So they're in their zone, but I'm on the podium, boom, out of the gates, there they go.
Yeah.
So yours would like, okay, my eyes are shut. It's like, whatever your positive sensation that would work for you that just brings that warm, pumped up, powerful feeling within your body. So that's really just the accessing of the powerful feeling.
Yeah.
And in control. I think that it's different with, if you're finding a spot for an individual who's going in for surgery. So you can have a resource spot for someone who's going into surgery if they're very anxious.
Fascinating. Yeah.
You're going to want a little more calmer as opposed to, and again, I work with athletes. So I'm saying, that powerful feeling that like, oh, I just won, it's a different kind of feeling because you're just tuning your nervous system differently because our nervous system is on a frequency spectrum. Like every single one of the brain waves is a different frequency.
Yeah.
Every single muscle tone, muscle compared to heart, a different frequency, right?
Yeah.
So it's tuning to a different frequency. So I'm saying like, oh yeah, it's powerful in control. That's that frequency.
Right.
But nonetheless, it's from the brain spotting, go from this like really hyper activated kind of frequency to a very calm, kind of almost exhausted, where you can barely even think frequency. It's a very calmed state. Yeah.
Well, and afterwards, just for the listeners to know, like this type of effect, like I slept 10 hours the next day, and then also took an hour nap, which is not typical for me.
Well, and to me, that was like, because you said concussion, I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's the concussion aspect.
Okay.
Sleeping is still the best thing for a concussion to heal the brain. The brain needs to be able to flush that 7 grams of tau protein. And if we're reprocessing things and reopening neural networks and the sporadic firing of the dendrites from that experience, there's still some healing that's going to take place again. So that can be some of that.
Okay.
And not saying that if you aren't dealing, because again, our body doesn't know how to hold on to mental and physical trauma any differently. And that's Dr. Robert Scar's work. And he's an MD neurologist that worked with the Traumatic Brain Injury Treatment Facility in Boulder, Colorado. And so he found that out. And again, these things will all probably be, the theories will be built on here soon. I mean, we only really know 10% of what the brain is capable of, so it's really exciting. But nonetheless, he was the one who identified that we really don't know how to hold on to them any differently. We just react the same way. So
right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's a journey for sure.
It's just as important as training. You know, I remember in undergrad, with exercise science world, it was just like, oh, you're training 5 days a week, blah, blah, blah. And then now that we've like pulled back to it's like, okay, you probably shouldn't be lifting the same muscle groups, the same pattern every single day of the week.
Right.
Working for us.
Yeah.
The rebuild process is just as important.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that with Brainspotting.
That's cool. With concussions, is that any different with the amount of visits for athletes who've dealt with numerous concussions?
It depends on how bad they're. If they are in post-concussion syndrome, I have had individuals that have needed a lot more sessions.
Got it. Okay.
So post-concussion syndrome turns into a whole nother deal. But when it comes to just flat-out concussions, absolutely not. I have seen the same thing. So I had an individual more recently endured the concussion at 17 in the Northern American Tour, was top in the world within the junior Olympic kinds of realm there. And then performance continued to decline. After about 15 sessions, now he got discretion on the U.S. ski team most recently. But again, the decline is, it's textbook. I look at their international ski Federation of International Ski or whatever stats.
Yeah.
Every time an athlete reaches out to me, and I'll be like, "Hey, well, what are your stats?" I don't know. Well, it's like, okay, so I gotta go online.
Right.
And so I get back to it, I'm going, okay, so here was the injury, here was the decline. The same thing, about 15 sessions, and it was fully cleared to where they were performing where they'd been prior to the concussion. And again, this kid had no post-concussion syndrome symptoms after the week of concussion protocol by their athletic trainer. But post-concussion syndrome with average population individuals, I do a lot of traumatic brain injury court work when individuals have been in a car accident or any other kinds of accidents like that. And it can take longer sometimes. And it's very, it's hard for me to watch an individual struggle that much, but other pieces start to play. So after a week, typically most people heal. After a month, the majority of individuals heal. So we're only looking at about 20% that actually go into having more post-concussion syndrome after that and those symptoms. So then you're starting to look at doing things like neuro, it's like neuro-ophthalmology is the new area where it's like the vision training or whatever you want to call it, vision therapy. And then there's the aspect of the vestibular system. So that's like if you're dizzy and nauseous, that kind of piece. And so that's physical therapist. And then you're looking at the cervical spine. You know, a lot of the post-concussion migraines and other visual stuff, we know that that's starting to come from the cervical spine, so that's your chiropractor, and of course the psychotherapy aspect, and really they're talking about like all psychotherapy, but nonetheless, I know that trauma reprocessing can yield better results and quicker results, but you gotta be doing all the pieces. Then we start looking at diet, and that's the Daniel Men's work, we're talking about the neuroinflammatory factor and prolonging the inflammation. It becomes very complex. People heal, but sometimes it's going to take longer. So it's just
got it. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces. Yeah,
really, literally 5 years ago, they're just going, okay, well, this is the issue, and they didn't even know how to approach it. So in the last 5 years, since it's came this far to having a real treatment approach, and it's Dr. Mickey Collins out of the University of Pittsburgh and that Dr. Jeffrey Kuchar that I mentioned earlier. They're the leaders in this, and they're doing a phenomenal job. I don't know if you saw the movie Concussion with Will Smith. Mickey Collins was in that movie. Alec Baldwin played him. And so I've seen Mickey speak 4 times in the last almost 6 years, and he's doing some really cool stuff, works with Penguins and the Steelers out there in Pittsburgh, but nonetheless, it is like his life mission to figure out how to get athletes back out there and to keep individuals from having the residual amount of inflammation that's causing the buildup of the tau protein and is unfortunately resulting in some of these neurocognitive disorders like CTE.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You work with a lot of downhill skiing athletes. Is that right?
Freestyle moguls.
Okay.
We got some snowboard half pipe in there.
Yeah.
Some aerial athletes too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of like this concept of like free of gravity almost.
That's unconsciously triggering them to muscle guard.
So
when you're sitting there in a session, you're literally having them, and Dr. David Graham calls it the micro movements, but you're literally having them like go through the movements that their hands have to be in the air, and you're having them sit there and you're going, okay, you're up in the air, how's this feel? Not very comfortable. It's like, okay, what are you afraid of? That I'm not going to land, or that my ski's going to pop off when I land. It's like, where do you feel that? My chest. It's like, so you're going through the aerial movements. Is pretty much in this. So you're having them deregulate their own amygdala, so their amygdala is not firing the cortisol to the intensity that it would, and inhibit their performance. And so you watch their video, because they watch video with their coaches and trainers and so on and so forth, and you will see them rushing some of these movements in the air and stuff and not trusting. Right. You have to trust. It's the same thing with any other, pole vaulters or anything like that. When you have it in the air, it is uncomfortable. It is not normal. The body is alarming. We're not supposed to leave the ground.
And I guess that's, you bring up a really important aspect of like trusting the body. How does this type of technique help athletes trust their body and their intuition? So not just athletic movements and like that gut reaction, but also in everyday life. Have you noticed anything like that?
Absolutely. Confidence, the increase in confidence in all of life performance. Absolutely. So I think over time, we will hang on to negative experience, because when we draw in and create memories, we will sometimes really latch on and create stronger memories associated with negative experiences, because that is survival, that's primal, that's primitive, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that once you rewrite some of these neural pathways to the positive, you are no longer questioning yourself with things. You no longer have that negative voice in the back of your head from so-and-so that said so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so about you, or said that you couldn't do something. I think that's just kind of how the performance confidence comes once someone detrains the maladaptation. And then your response and reaction to things, you become untrusting in life when you're constantly, unconsciously and consciously predicting that something negative is going to happen. I will always see athletes' attitude become more positive. And it's just, the social psychological kind of result of this, but it's amazing. That's the fun part about this. It's really just seeing athletes like reach even, I've had ones retire at this point in time, because it's time. But it's just like, and now they're continuing on to college and doing all these other amazing things in their life. It's not just about this, sports stats and the time that they're in the sport. It's about expanding on performance in life as well. And confidence comes from trusting in your training. So when you're talking about training in life, you're like, okay, my college training, my family upbringing, just my own resourcing skills within life, like how you handle things. It's like you're trusting your training for your confidence. And on the mountain, it's like, okay, I've done every single thing that I can to be at the top in my field. So that's something an athlete needs to know as well. And so when you're talking about the 90% that's mental, or the athlete, you're like, well, shouldn't you be, just in kind of looking around at some of the mental conditioning and, like I said, the deconditioning that I provide? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, do you work with like a range of athletes of like, like professional athletes to like high school athletes?
Like 10-year-olds.
Oh, okay.
Than the youngest. I will work with any athlete that loves their sport and wants to do better. Period. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like you get these elite ones, which are very, very fun because someone else is doing the stats for one thing, and they're very, very motivated, and they don't have a lot of other outside interruptions. You got like a high school kid, they've got 20 other things in their plate. So sometimes, it's just not as clear cut, like, oh, here's the results, And just, again, they're going for multiple goals. And so, but it's fabulous when the kid gets into college and off they go. That's just as great of a end result with the work that we're doing or whatever, but nonetheless, the elite is really fun because, it's their job at that moment. It's really fun.
Yeah. 2 questions. I'll say this and then you can pick what way we want to go. Because if I don't say both of them, I'll forget one of them. Have you seen like the pressure of performance be different compared to the high school athlete compared to the elite athlete? And how does brain spotting, and I want to get into the light therapy as well. Yeah. But how does that help almost keep them in that flow state and not feel the pressure of performance? Or is that possible?
I think that it's the same. It is all perspective. It's the person's experience. Like, I have not seen any difference between the high schooler who's a perfectionist and wants to do well in every aspect of their life compared to the individual that their only job is to ski or snowboard at that moment in time. They're like, we're football players. No, I think that typically an athlete loves sport, wants to succeed in life, and is kind of a perfectionist type A personality. So I don't think it's any different. It is just as important. And so they all need the detraining of the stressors in life, the past traumas, the what if, worst case scenario. That's another aspect of doing the brain spotting to prepare an athlete for the event. It's very different than just the deconditioning. It is, I'm having them go at the top of the course, or they're out there on the football field, and I'm going, okay, well, what can happen? Well, so-and-so can run into me, and then I can blow my knee out. Okay, where do you feel that? It's like, oh, well, this is going to happen. Oh, I can
interesting.
Blah, 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 blah. It's all the athlete's language, because again, I'm probably butchering each. I cannot be, the jargon of every sport. But nonetheless, with the skiers, same kind of things. Like, oh man, the course can be icy and I can catch an edge. Oh man, the flat lining. Oh, it's going to be snowing. I might not be able to see. That's the stressor. Like all the environmental stuff as well. Yeah. Even I had this one wrestler kid. It's like at state, it was super loud, and he'd remembered it from the year before. And so he was anxious about the volume. Right. Because it was kind of throwing him out of his zone. So it just, sight, sounds, and smells we talked about.
Interesting. Where does motivation is always something that can be like tricky, even like with the clients that I work with, of like, that's one of the things that we talk about is like, I wasn't motivated or I lacked motivation. Is motivation such a thing?
Absolutely. Motivation comes from within, and motivation is an aspect of the blocks, right? So when we're talking about performance blocks, it's like, to me, I'm just sitting around, oh man, I would do some work with, especially because I do weight loss work too. And I love it because of that, because you sit there and you're going, okay, so what happened about this time that you started eating emotionally? What happened at this point in time that you stopped loving yourself? Because really exercise and eating healthy is all about loving yourself, and just anything in life, us wanting to thrive, we got to love ourselves first. So I would start to go back through their history and see what happened. Oh, the boyfriend that broke up with me, and that's when I stopped exercising and eating healthy, and that was really devastating to me. And once you clear some of those blocks, the motivation just comes. But yeah, external motivation, I don't know how much that works. And I'm sure you've seen it with your weight loss clients, where it's like, oh, I want to get into this wedding dress. It's like, this is the external motivation. So right. Like, okay, are you really into this? And is it really going to be what gets you off the couch to go do your workout at night to be held accountable? Right. I wouldn't think so. I would pick at that like crazy and be like, well, so it's just for this. But what about other aspects of your life? When did you stop caring? When did you stop loving yourself? I mean, I would pick that up. Right. To get the person to go back to really reprocess whatever it is that started creating some of that paralyzed kinds of behaviors. Because it's that flat effect again that we were talking about, that depressed level of functioning.
So, because with my sport, I linked my sport and my motivation out of revenge for a trauma that happened in my life. Is that the same type of
sustainable?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's where I was getting stuck in that mental block of like, I'm not motivated anymore.
Works for a while.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, not long term. And you break down your body with that too, because that can be, you can use it as a habitual resourcing behavior.
Interesting.
So when we look at exercise, it's pumping up oxytocin. So if we have a lot of stress and holding on to the past trauma, then the cortisol's high. So then you start habitual resourcing behaviors. And so we see with the overtraining syndrome, we see with the female triad, we see with the stress fractures and stuff, some of those can be habitual resourcing behaviors that are actually negative in the end. Same thing with eating disorders, same thing with, then of course, drugs and alcohol, those are like the obvious habitual resourcing behaviors. But you see it a lot with athletes, a lot of the professional athletes coming out of the leagues, they're all beat up and sore and hurt, and they got, finally had to be pushed out because they had to retire because the body was done, and then they turned to utilizing some of the drugs and alcohol, and so absolutely not sustainable.
Right.
But I would work reprocessing more with you, and your motivation will come.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you found anyone who was motivated out of revenge with a sport, and they've gone through this process and picked a different sport, or did they go back to that same sport?
I've never had someone pick a different sport, because it is typically like when you're kind of talking about it's late high school into college, professional, because it is that time frame. Right.
I had
a recent individual who was burnt out on gymnastics and then went to track, so there was one with that kind of thing, but they didn't try to reprocess the stuff with gymnastics to see if that was right or not.
Interesting.
So sometimes people have to shift before they actually heal whatever this was that caused the block or and I don't recommend
because then you're just doing the same thing in a different sport. Is that right?
You still have all the trauma on the brain and the body.
If
the kid is bulking in a block. I had a little gymnast individual, and as long as gym is a very disciplined, hard, again, going up in the air, that's it's very intense on the nervous system, but nonetheless made the individual clear the blocks, did very well at state, then went ahead and shifted to a different sport. But I didn't want the quitting before we gave the therapy a shot. And that was good. The person was happy they didn't quit, but there's still always grief. An athlete needs to process. I love doing a grief session with a client. Even if I've had retired NHL and NFL players come from around, because I'm kind of known for some of the brain healing therapies, but they will come in and I'll just make them do a session even before I release them with their light therapy device to take home, because we just kind of clear some of the past injuries and the decision to retire and stuff, and they're kind of surprised that they have a little bit of emotion about it, and then they feel a little lighter when they leave. So it's interesting. That's a grief. All transitions are great.
I mean, I know the past couple, especially during this time with it coming into the summer months, I always get sad just because I'm not doing the sport that I was so passionate about. And I'm at a place where I'm like, do I go back? Like last summer I started going to some of the ski tournaments just to see people ski and see some of my friends. So it's just like tapping my toe back in the water type of thing.
Well, I would certainly love to do some more sessions with you to see if we get you back out there.
I know. I think the big thing too is because I don't know if the listeners know this, but because of the concussions, I think I've been even hesitant to work out because I've had headaches with my workouts. And so I'm just like hesitant with movement in general because of how my body's reacted with having
just that stress alone. Just working out that stress. So then you're wondering about, I'd be curious. Do you see a chiropractor or cranial?
I have off and on. Yeah.
I would do concurrently a little bit of the cranial work with the brain spotting work so that you're making sure that you're allowing for, like I said, it's with car accidents, I see it all the time, particularly like all of this in the back of the brain is just like on fire. All these muscles are held into place. So I would have you do a little bit of that concurrently. So, and that gives a good segue into the light therapy. So light therapy, it will break up scar tissues, particularly my big lasers. So there's photobiomodulation lasers, and then there's polychromatic LED lights. The polychromatic LED lights are a light spectrum from about 550 to nearly 900. So it's the red light and near-infrared light. What that does is it stimulates the mitochondria and it increases the number and size. The only other way to do that is human growth hormone and exercise, of course. And then it triggers the ATP, which produces the nitric oxide, which is an antioxidant. So that in and of itself, stimulating your mitochondria, amazing, helpful. Neurogenesis and regeneration is happening with the body, but also it is increasing the blood flow in the circulation. So we're getting the toxins out of any of the injured areas. And then it's breaks up the calcification like I talked about. So a few times, especially back when I was in Colorado, I would have an individual that came in, and at this point in time, they would talk about like fusing, spine kind of thing, and like a 17-year-old. The disc was noticeably off to the side. I thought, well, let's do some brain spotting and some light therapy concurrently. Then at one point in time, I finally said, how about you go back into the chiropractor and see if this works now? Chiropractor cracked it back into place. We did a couple more brain spotting sessions, a couple more light therapy. This little individual went from not even being able to sit down during class because of intense pain to back out there playing soccer and skiing. So it's amazing. So when that body locks into place with that injury, if you are able to mechanically manipulate it, because that's kind of what I talk about, if at the side of the thing, you can mechanically manipulate the tissue while concurrently manipulating the midbrain, which is holding the body into torsion, you can get the body to relax again. And then the skeletal system comes back into place. The muscles start firing again. And with my one hot laser, it makes the muscles fire because it's the electrical convulsion. And I didn't do the hot laser, but it's the same hot laser that the NHL and NFL has. Okay. So they've been using it in sports medicine. I mean, it'll heal a bone 50% quicker. It'll heal anything with a blood flow 50% quicker. It's amazing. I thought it was magic when I saw it presented to sports medicine. But yeah, because in undergrad, I mean, like we're in the athletic training room, like rubbing, ice cups.
Right. Yeah.
And so really cool. Also, I had an individual who kept getting stress fractures who was a triathlete, and so we were putting light therapy on them, and the stress fractures were going away while they were still concurrently training for an event.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it's really cool. But yeah, so the light therapy, there's over 4,500 peer-reviewed studies. It's Dr. Michael Homlin's research out of Harvard that's showing that it is reversing Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Also, there was the most recent, they're talking about now and knowing that light photon energy. So in the brain, we actually have that same spectrum of light already within the brain. So I think that's fascinating. You're just adding in more neuro energy, more energy to the tissue. So it's fascinating. And then if you think about with the brain, with the contra-coup or the secondary concussion banging around in the spine or the skull, spine's what it is, but nonetheless, banging around in the skull, you're going to get an outside kind of like a sheath of like a scab, right?
Yeah.
And so oxidation. And so when you think about the nitric oxide going in there and healing that oxidized tissue, and to explain, with a cell, it has 4 oxygen molecules, and so a free radical will take away one of those oxygen molecules, the cell still lives, and then an antioxidant will come in and replace that. But if you get rid of 2 of those oxygen molecules, cell dies. So that's the whole purpose within and around free radical antioxidants. Right. So if you're pumping your body full of antioxidants, you're not going to have as much cellular death, and really big deal with the concussions. Also with light therapy, Dr. Michael Homlin found, again, Harvard, this isn't, woo-woo. Yeah. I know, light therapy sounds like, no, it's like, no, this is the actual mechanism. But it's the same as, the UV, you're out here, you're producing vitamin D. It's the same chemical reaction. Oh, yeah. Hitting you. Nonetheless, he found that if you put it on the brain within 72 hours of sustaining the concussion, it will cut down by the damage by 50%, which is amazing. Dang. Yeah, and so when I used to go out to the ski hill with my athletes, I would carry my little handheld laser. And like, oh, you went down. Here, let's come. Yeah, I know it. You don't know when you're concussed. Right.
Well, and that's the other thing, too, because, and I think, because I didn't realize how severe the first concussion I had was, because I'm such an athlete. I'm like, I think I taught the next morning after, and then I went and taught a full 3-day weekend workshop.
It's so scary because that's a jostling kind of sport, and at any minute you could hit your head again. It's like,
well, it wasn't with water skiing. It was just with it was just movement. It was just exercise stuff, but still, I was still moving.
Again, putting more stress on the body. It's already in distress. It's just exacerbating that oxidative stress and increasing those the body's response. Yeah. Once the body knows how to do something, it keeps doing it. It's interesting when people are always talking about chronic pain. They did a study. Yeah. And I have it marked on these little guys in just an example. So like chronic pain, you know, you got your pain signal right here on each side of the brain. Well, they showed individuals who all had arthritic knee pain in the right knee, and they showed every single person had different spots of the brain that were lit up in association with that pain. So that just goes to show once you create these neural pathways,
you're training. Yeah.
And so when you talk about inflammation, that's what we're talking about. It's like you're already inflamed, so then you go and stress the system more, and so you're just increasing the body. Like, oh my gosh, we're inflamed.
Right.
Being inflamed. Got to keep upping the ante.
Yeah.
Those adrenals.
How as an athlete, because I know before I had the car accidents, there would be times where I would go to the lake, ski, maybe have a wipeout, and then like drive home and not even remember how I got home. So yeah, I know there's been some scary things I've done with my body, unfortunately. As an athlete, for those who are listening, what are some guidelines that you can give them to just be really cautious of, like, knowing that they may be dealing with a concussion or a mild
buddy system? You almost want one of your training buddies to be kind of looking out for you. And I know with boxers and fighters, like their trainer is very attuned to like, what's going on with them, and kind of like, and it almost seems like, oh yeah, this full-grown man, this is the guy doing all this stuff, or female, like, oh, nonetheless, it's like, yeah, but that's because it's like you're drunk, you don't really know what's going on.
Right.
I find that the buddy system with your friends, because really, you know, what if we've learned anything when it comes to the NHL and the NFL with all the concussion litigation, those types of things, it's like, you know, you really need to look out for yourself as an athlete and your buddies, because the organization itself, one, they don't have really the time and training professionals and money and all that, whatever, to deal with it. And so it's really looking out for each other, you know, and saying to someone, man, you know, you took a really hard fall out there. I'm not going to let you drive tonight. And I really do, you know what I mean? Like once check in with you in the morning kind of thing, you know? And man, it used to be what's really funny too. And they don't do it anymore, but every few hours wake up someone when we think they have a concussion.
Oh yeah.
We don't do that anymore because we know that the brain needs to go through its natural flushing process. That's 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is the most optimal for anyone to be sleeping at night, and that's Dr. Buza and Collins' work out of the University of Pittsburgh. It's very important for you to be sleeping at that time for anyone, but nonetheless, very much important when you have the concussion going on and not letting your circadian rhythm get all messed up. So even if after you hit your head at practice or something, don't go to bed at 4 p.m. We kind of want to try to keep you up all the way until about 7 to 8 at least, and then let you crash, because we don't want that to get off, because once it's off, it's off. Right. I don't know if anyone is a shift worker out there or whatnot, but it's like, ooh, that's the worst thing you can do is mess up your circadian rhythm, because it starts to mess with all your hormones. Right. And melatonin and serotonin get all off balance. Right. And we just learned that, you know, melatonin is has neurogenesis properties, which is really cool. And so they're doing adding it to a lot of individuals who have Asperger autism symptoms, and so they're putting 10 milligrams is more neurogenesis properties. So I was like, oh, that's neat.
Interesting. Going back to the light therapy.
Oh boy.
I thought it was fascinating the day after. So I saw you on a Friday, and that Saturday morning, that's when I slept the 10 hours. But I always deal with like neuroma pains in both my feet, and I was so surprised the next day. I was like, oh my God, I don't have pain. And it lasted for 2 full days. I was like, what is this? Like, I've just been like so accustomed to this type of pain, and just kind of, again, like the trainer's life, and like, I just go with it.
It was the inflammation, decreasing that inflammation. And then we know, actually, there's multiple studies with neuropathy that it heals the neuropathy pain and increases the natural blood flow. Any kinds of nerve pain, you have to start looking at 2 different things. Is there an oxidation issue? So that's like that's inflammation, that's a cortisol stress stuff. Or is it tissue damage? Well, you know, both can be remedied with light therapy. So it's just fascinating. The inflammation, pushing on the nerves. There's so many pieces, but it's like it addresses all aspects of that. So heals you. And there's actually a couple studies with that very specific device, the in-light devices, where it showed the diabetic neuropathy to where the legs were just like purple, and they had regained their beautiful color, not the purple color. Right.
That makes sense though. That makes complete sense.
Oh yeah. And then when you talk about like the spine, so we know that if we activate, especially with the big laser, you know, where the insertion of the limb is, it can possibly impact the leg. So, and I didn't even do, I didn't do the hot laser yet, but it's a little different.
Yeah.
But so if you have inhibitories down the spine, that could be causing pain down here.
Oh, interesting.
So we address the spine. So it's just interesting. And that's Michael Homblin's work. He's going, oh, you do the brainstem, you do the spine, then you do the area. It's just, and it's evolved even. So
fascinating.
The guy who brought the light therapy over from Europe in 1993, James Carroll, and brought it to Harvard. He came out for a training, and I was so honored to meet him last November. But they were talking about like how the protocol is just constantly changing because they're learning more. Also with the light therapy, so most primarily fat adipose tissue is a lot of accumulated toxins. Well, if you do an hour of the 640 spectrum of the light, it will burn the fat. So it's dosing. So we do 20 minutes. We know 20 minutes addresses the brain, the skeletal stuff, but the fat burning is an hour. Putting it on your liver can assist with some of the fatty liver stuff and the detox.
Oh, interesting.
And then another thing, when you're putting it on your head and putting it on your body, think about all the metals that we've accumulated because we're heating them up. So you want to go home, you want to take a little bit of charcoal or take some spirulina. Spirulina has some really cool studies around the children in Chernobyl. With they're down, to 20% of having the radiation in their system that they had 10 years ago. So just doing 3 milligrams of spirulina every day. It's like, oh, this is amazing. So things can bind to those toxins and get them out of our system.
Right.
Yeah, if you heat them up, you got to have them binding to something or else they go back in your body and circulate again.
Interesting. Yeah. So why brain spotting then the light therapy?
So we pump up, because it's the overload principle where we're talking about the nervous system. So we're pushing your cortisol up. I'm activating you as much as possible. You're feeling it through your brain and your body. Then we kind of rewrite that with some oxytocin. At the end of that, you're feeling calm. Then we throw you on the light therapy bed, and we're pumping your system again, then full of nitric oxide, which is the antioxidant. So it just fail-proof rewriting with positive endorphins. I love it. I've been doing the combo process for 5 years.
Yeah. It was interesting because I know I was sharing with a friend the experience of just that was intense. I've gone through. The listeners know.
So cool.
Yeah. So when you do any type of first time coming back to exercise or anything like that, a lot of times it's a shock to the system of
overtraining. I mean,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So with doing this more, is it not as intense?
Right. The first one's always elicits the most pain, just like exercise.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Again, it's the nervous system reacts the same way.
Yeah.
So it's the overload principle. So that's why I said I'm upsetting it as much as possible, and you finally reach the top of the peak of it, and then you come down. So it's the same thing as when you're lifting. You don't just keep lifting forever. It's you finally get to the point where you just can't do it anymore and you come down. So it's the same overload principle. But nonetheless, yes, the next time can be a little intense as well. And about the third time, it's not as bad. And I know for myself now, I can't count how many brain spotting sessions I've had because I've started getting brain spotting at 23. We work on each other all the time.
Right.
Our training's on 35 now. So I will have a session and I will get as upset as possible. I love crying. Crying is such a relief. And my hands and feet will be kind of numb. And then later that day, I'm just euphoric. I'm oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Can you explain the physiological response crying has on our body?
So it's Dr. William Frey's work out of the University of Minnesota because I kept. When Dr. David Graham talked about processing, signs that someone's processing, and then definitely movement and kind of cracking your neck and hands and feet and all that. And then he started talking about, he said yawning could occur. And then I started really seeing with my athlete clients, they were yawning a ton, or else people would cry. And then some would never actually cry, but they yawned like crazy. And
interesting.
So I started kind of investigating. And so when it came to the emotional tears, Dr. William Frey with the University of Minnesota found that we are actually releasing oxytocin when we're crying these emotional tears. So that was amazing. And then when it came to the yawning, I kept trying to figure out if someone could tell me what that meant. And so I was at a sports medicine conference and was talking to Dr. Frank Palermo. He's the lead physician on this WABI QEEG, and he's the director of the American College of Physicians, worked for the Avalanche hockey team and national hockey team in Colorado for 20 years. And interesting guy. And I was telling him about my experience with some of the bumpers, because he'd been the US ski team doc when Johnny Mosley was back there doing the freestyle moguls. And he said, you've had some bumpers come back. He said, that's amazing. I said, well, what's the yawning thing, you know? And he's just like, well, you are activating someone so much, and then they're coming to such a calm state that their body's signaling that they need to bring in oxygen because they're so relaxed. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
Someone's so upset to relax. So
yeah.
I'm looking for both of those things. And I see it quite often with concussions too. I will see yawns, and just people yawning so much it's like uncontrollable and they can't stop, particularly with fighters and football players and hockey players. But nonetheless, like, the deeper that we get into in working with the concussion and going through the memories of the concussions of car accidents and sports injuries, I would be curious to see if we're
oh yeah interesting. It's not because they're tired or sleep deprived.
No.
Interesting.
No, and it's funny because I've had people just like, I'm just so tired, because sometimes people can't hold their eyes open when you're doing the concussion work because you're overloading their senses so strongly, and they'll be sitting there like, I can't keep my eyes open. I actually had a neuropsychologist come over, and she's here in Washington, a wonderful neuropsych, and she's a psychologist as well, but nonetheless, she was injured from a youth adolescent kicked her when she was in a group. Yeah, poor thing. And so she knew she had a concussion, and again, she evaluates concussions, which is really funny.
Right.
So she knew she had a concussion, and so she came in, she's like, I kind of want to work on this past concussion. It was years ago, and I knew that I had one, and so we were doing that, and she's going, I can't hold my eyes open. She said, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And it's just like, this is not placebo. This is, I'm like, I know. But it was freaking her out because she knows so much about the brain.
Right, yeah.
But she was just like, I can't keep my eyes open. I know, it's normal. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, but so nonetheless, yeah, that was the feedback of a neuropsych who clearly wasn't just, a kid sitting going, no, I'm just tired. It's like, no, you're not tired. Something's going on.
Yeah. You said emotional tears. Can there be other types of tears that are not emotional?
With a release, he talks emotional. So he looked, actually, with the research he's done, he looks under the microscope, and tears have different compositions. Some look like prisms, some look like...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I wouldn't know off the top of my head, aside from, I know with a release, if it's just, water coming out, I know that my nose will just run. I know that other brain spotters and clients, their nose will just start running, and they'll start sneezing sometimes. It is a release of some kind. So if you're accessing the middle brain, and you're getting in there, and your dura mater sheath that's around the brain and the spine controls everything. You know what I mean? So if you're releasing, I think anything can happen. I know that I will have to pee really bad after, but I know that has an aspect to do with your adrenals also. So it's like,
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. And a lot of times people are just like, I have to pee before we do like that. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, because this is going to make you want to pee more. Well, because you're decreasing inflammation, so more water.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So I think there's so much more for us to understand, and that's what's so exciting about it. But, I just do know the emotional tier one, because again, I guess we all kind of want to understand what's going on in the brain when we're upset, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess, is there a possibility for tears to be different, like tears of grief, tears of anger, tears of loneliness, tears, absolutely,
of failure?
My sense would be, though, because the amygdala is so strong with either oxytocin or cortisol, how can it just be one or the other? Right. My assumption is that it's a mix of both. It's got to be, because we have mixed emotions. It's like, I know, like when the athlete that wins, they're standing up at the party and they just start crying.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're like, they don't, you can't, it's mixed emotions.
Well, and that's you bring up a really good point, because there's so many times in my life where I've been able to accomplish something that I never thought I would be able to accomplish, and I'm surprised by my tears.
Right.
I'm just like, why am I crying?
So kind of release those.
Yeah.
Build up. See, and I just love, I used to be one of those, especially younger, I was a college athlete, I ran cross country, all these things, and I used to just like crying is weakness leaving the body. So if I got upset, I'd go for like a 20-mile run. I was just a very intense individual. And then I started to realize, like, oh, wait a second, we need to have emotions, and I'm actually pretty flat-fecked and pretty angry right now in my life, and so maybe I need to work on this. And so once I started to like realize that's actually being vulnerable and being able to feel emotions and process emotions and showing emotions is actually more of a strength. Now I'm just like, oh man, I was at my friend's arch contest a couple weeks ago in Portland, and he and his friend finished and they won. I'm just sitting there crying. I don't care. I'm just like, oh my God, it's amazing. But man, back in the day, no way. It's like, again, it served my job well, because kind of the joke is when people come in, it's like, oh, I'm going to try to get you to cry. And they kind of laugh. And then when they cry, oh, you got me to cry. You did it. I'm like, yep. Yeah.
I've always said, and I think I've said this on a couple other episodes, it's the only way our spirit can sweat is through our tears.
Yeah. I like that.
And so it's just, because it is a lot of hard work with that release of letting that go.
Yes.
So that's just has helped me, because I've been that person. I feel like I'm more comfortable crying in public, but I always would hide my tears in the past. And just with like a lot of other stuff that our family has gone through, that's one thing I've told my brothers, of just like, okay to cry. It's the only way your spirit sweats. And it's just helping them realize, like, oh, it's strong to be able to release this aspect.
Vulnerability is strength. It was funny that you say that, because at one point in time, he was an NHL player and a friend, and I was like, I'm crying, I can't stop crying. He said, oh, that's because you're healing. I'm like, okay, so because NFL enforcers telling me that it's okay to cry, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just funny. He's Pisces. He's narcissistic.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to go over?
No, I think we touched on everything, and just basically, like, I was so honored to be on your podcast.
Yeah.
Just honored to get some kind of platform to get to really do some advocacy work with athletes, because still 60% of athletes who are struggling with some neurodepression are not seeking help, where the average person, we're still 37% with the average individual who's not an athlete who doesn't seek help. And it's, it's so hard on me when I have all of these resources for individuals. I don't want someone to sit and struggle, and I don't want someone to not be able to reach their full potential in sport or life.
Right.
And then, of course, the negative, and lost 2 different friends to suicide over the last 15 years, and they were athletes, and it was just very hard to see that happen, and I don't want anyone else to lose anyone. And we know right now the leading cause of death between males of 10 to 39 is suicide. So just trying to get it out there that, this detraining will bring you back to your optimal neuro functioning, and that it's not something that's is wrong with you per se, or any of those things. When you're feeling sad or depressed, it is the body's reaction to the mental or physical trauma. It can be detrained, and you're back to the person you were before. And it is possible, and it's a little difficult, but not that bad, because the end results can be amazing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I was excited, and like, oh yeah, this athlete wants to be this.
Yeah.
Hopefully stay the life, literally. And increase someone's quality.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point of how athletes may not even realize they're going through a depression. And I think for me, it's taken a lot of injuries in being rear-ended 3 times to realize, oh shit, like, I'm going through a depression. Even though it may not look like it, the typical, like, stay in bed, don't want to do anything, still motivated, still like doing things in the entrepreneurial world of getting stuff done, or
happy?
Exactly. Like, it's just like, and that's the other thing, where this year it's been really like that question, like, why am I doing what am I doing?
And I hear that from all high achievers, because I do work with other individuals on performance and CEOs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it is just that bringing back the joy, and and that's what brings me joy, is that people regain their joy.
Yeah. Just joy all around. Well, I'm super excited that to meet you and to have the Brainspotting, because someone has recommended it to me. I never really adventured to the EMDR. I was like super fascinated with the Brainspotting instead. So it's an honor to have you on the show. and we may have to do a follow-up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Awesome. Strong Ones, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this show, make sure you share it out with your family and friends and give it the 5 stars and a review. It'll help grow this community and help grow this message of becoming healthy and whole with that. So thank you so much, and we are peacing out.
Bye.